Have you ever noticed how darkness doesn't just eliminate sight, it amplifies sound, and sometimes it amplifies fear? We are wired to seek comfort in the light, aren't we? It's why those tiny, humming plastic boxes, those nightlights, become absolute anchors in a world full of shadows for a small child. For my daughter Lily, who is 6 going on 16, that little glow was more than just illumination, it was a promise. It was the guarantee that the monsters under the bed were still just dust bunnies, clearly visible and entirely unthreatening. It was the ritual of our lives, the gentle heartbeat of our quiet suburban home in late summer. Every night, for the last 3 years, the same routine unfolds. I tuck her into her twin bed, the one with the soft, worn dinosaur duvet cover. I sit on the edge, the mattress dipping comfortably beneath my weight, and I read to her. It might be a classic fairy tale, or perhaps a book about a determined little space explorer, but it always ends the same way, with a kiss on the forehead, the sound of my voice trailing off into a gentle whisper, and the unmistakable, slightly blue-tinted haze of the plastic nightlight plugging into the lower outlet, casting a benign arc of safety across the bookshelf and the fluffy carpet. I remember looking at that scene countless times, the quiet, the calm, the simple perfection of parental connection, and thinking, this is everything. This particular night, though, was different. We were deep into a story about a very brave otter who had misplaced his favorite pebble. Lily was curled up against her pillows, her breathing already slowing, heavy with the security of the moment. I had just gotten to the part where the otter was searching near the old willow root, and the air conditioner, which had been rattling lightly in the window, suddenly gave a heavy sigh and ceased its low drone. The silence that followed was instant and absolute. It wasn't just the AC, it was the entire house. The refrigerator hum stopped. The faint electronic whine of the television left on downstairs vanished. The world went still. And then, the light went out. It wasn't a gradual fade or a flicker. It was an instant, heavy blanket of absolute oppressive blackness. The kind of blackness that has physical weight, that presses in on your eyes, tempting you to strain and search for non-existent edges. And crucially, that little blue beacon, Lily's nightlight, was gone. In the sudden vacuum of light and sound, I felt Lily's small hand shoot out and clamp onto my arm. Her grip was startlingly strong, the immediate, instinctive panic of a child confronted by the unknown. "Mama," she whispered, and the sound was tiny, sharp with fear, echoing slightly in the darkness. "Mama, where did the light go? I can't see anything." My immediate reaction was to pull her closer, drawing her small, trembling body against my side. I could feel her heart hammering against her ribs, quick and frantic, like a trapped bird. My own heart gave a sympathetic lurch, knowing that physical darkness often translates directly to emotional terror for a 6-year-old. I knew the routine. Comfort, locate the flashlight, reassure. But the flashlight was downstairs, and in this specific moment, the absence of light was the immediate, present monster. I tightened my hold on her hand, focusing on making my voice a steady, low anchor in the chaos. I had to ground her, not just with touch, but with certainty. "It's okay, sweet girl," I said, letting the warmth of my breath brush against the top of her head. "The power just went out. It happens sometimes, especially after those big heat waves we've had." "But it's too dark," she insisted, her voice wavering dangerously close to tears. "The dark is big, Mama. I can't see the door. I can't see you." It was that last phrase that struck me. I can't see you. The darkness wasn't just about missing the objects. It was about the fear of losing connection, of being truly alone. I shifted slightly so I was sitting cross-legged facing her, still holding her hand firmly. I brought her tiny, soft palm up to my cheek so she could feel the texture of my skin and the steady rhythm of my breathing. "Listen closely, Lily," I murmured, keeping my tone intentionally soft and deep, cutting through the silence without alarming her further. I know it feels big right now. It feels like the dark has swallowed everything. But remember this, sweet girl, and hold it in your heart. I paused just for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle, letting her focus entirely on the sound of my voice. Even when the light goes out, love never disappears. Never. It doesn't need a switch. It doesn't need an outlet. It is always here. I repeated the phrase slowly. Even when the light goes out, love never disappears. She was quiet then, absorbing the weight of the promise. I could feel her settling slightly, the frantic tremor beginning to subside, replaced by the deep concentration of a child trying to process a complex, abstract idea. How do you explain to a 6-year-old that the greatest source of illumination is invisible? I knew I needed more than just a phrase. I needed a way to translate that abstract concept into something concrete, something she could hold on to, much like she was holding on to my hand. I needed a story that wasn't in a book, that didn't require light to read, a story born entirely out of the darkness we were sharing. I want to tell you about a girl, I began, shifting my grip on her hand to a gentle, steady interlock. Her name was Alara, and she lived a long, long time ago in a valley surrounded by immense old forests. I settled back against the headboard, pulling Lily close against my chest so she could feel the vibration of my voice through my bones. I slowed my words, painting the scene with auditory details, letting the sound of my voice become the light in the room. Alara, I explained, was a vibrant child, full of laughter and boundless curiosity. She loved color and sunshine, and she hated shadows, much like my Lily. Her mother was a weaver, known throughout the village for creating beautiful, intricate tapestries, each thread shining with dyes made from mountain berries and deep earth minerals. But Alara's mother was also known for her voice. It was a clear, melodic sound that carried far, whether she was calling Alara in for dinner or singing quiet songs as she worked at her loom. That voice, Alara knew, was the prettiest sound in the world. Now, Alara was often warned about the deep woods, not because they held fierce creatures, but because they held something much more daunting, the echoing cave. The mouth of the cave was easy to find, always cool and mossy, but once you stepped inside, the light disappeared utterly and completely. The villagers believed the cave swallowed the light, trapping it within its glassy, dark walls. One day, Alara was playing near the edge of the woods, chasing a particularly dazzling blue butterfly, the kind that only appears in the deepest, hottest part of summer. She chased it deeper and deeper, her focus entirely on the shimmering wings. Suddenly, the butterfly fluttered right into the dark mouth of the echoing cave. Alara didn't stop to think. She ducked down and scrambled after it, convinced she could just reach in quickly and pull the butterfly back out. But the moment her second foot crossed the threshold, the entrance seemed to vanish behind her. The small sliver of afternoon sun that had been filtering in disappeared instantly. Lily shifted slightly, pulling my hand tighter. I could feel her picturing the scene, her own primal fear of the dark projecting onto Alara. "It was dark, Lily," I whispered, emphasizing the word. "Not just twilight dark, but thick, velvet black dark. The kind of dark that feels heavy, like it's pressing against your eyes and your ears." Alara couldn't see her hands in front of her face. She reached out and felt only cold, slick stone, damp with condensation. She called out for the butterfly, but her voice didn't sound right. It sounded small and swallowed by the stone walls. Alara started to panic. She tried to turn around, scrambling backward, thinking surely the light was just a few steps behind her. But every direction felt the same, cold, wet, and absolutely empty of light. She started to cry, soft, desperate sobs that sounded hollow in the immense stone room. She imagined the cave was a big, hungry mouth, and she was trapped deep inside its throat. I paused the story, making sure Lily was still breathing evenly. That's how you feel right now, isn't it, sweetie? Like the dark is big, and you are very small. Lily nodded, a barely perceptible motion in the darkness. But Alara's mother had told her something important. Whenever Alara felt alone, her mother told her to remember the way her voice sounded, because that sound was the sound of home, and if she could hear home, she could find her way back. So, Alara stopped crying. She forced herself to sit down on the cold floor and focus. All she could hear now was her own shallow breathing and the faint drip, drip, drip of water falling somewhere far away. The fear started to turn into numbness. She didn't know which way was out or which way was in. She was completely lost. Then she remembered the weaving. She remembered sitting next to her mother's loom, watching the shuttle fly back and forth. And her mother would always sing a certain song while she worked, a lullaby about the stars coming out one by one. In the deep, thick silence of the cave, Alara started to sing that song. Her voice was shaky at first, small and thin. But she kept singing, picturing her mother's face, focusing on the memory of the warmth of the sun-drenched weaving room, the scent of lavender and wool. As she sang, something remarkable happened. Because the cave was full of echoes, her small, thin voice began to bounce off the walls, multiplying. Suddenly, it wasn't just Alara singing. It sounded like her mother was singing too. The echo wasn't just a reflection of sound. It was a memory translated into sound, comforting and firm. The song seemed to settle around her, creating a circle of audible warmth. And as she listened to the echoes of her mother's song surrounding her, Alara realized something crucial. Even though she couldn't see the walls, the way the sound bounced and returned to her told her exactly where the stone was and where the openness was. She began to hear the acoustic geography of the cave. The echoes were strongest and loudest in one particular direction, the direction the sound traveled before it had space to dissipate. That, she realized, must be the way out. That path must lead to the wide, open air. Alara stood up. She didn't rush. She started walking slowly, one careful step at a time, moving toward the direction where the echoes of her song felt the freest, where the sound felt less trapped. She was guided not by light, which was impossible to find, but by the sound of love, channeled through the memory of her mother's voice. I felt Lily breathe a long, shaky sigh against my chest. She was completely immersed now, the panic gone, replaced by the steady rhythm of the narrative. "And did she get out, Mama?" Lily asked, her voice barely above a breath. "She did," I confirmed, smiling into the darkness, knowing that the physical darkness had been replaced by the mental picture I had created. She followed the growing strength of the echoes, and eventually the heavy, dead air of the cave began to change. She started to feel a soft breath of wind, smelling of pine needles and damp earth, and then, slowly, a pinprick of glorious golden sunlight appeared, framed by mossy stone. She walked out of the cave and collapsed onto the soft, sun-warmed dirt. Safe. She didn't look for the blue butterfly anymore. She just ran home. When she burst into her mother's weaving room, her mother didn't yell at her for being gone too long. She didn't scold her for going near the echoing cave. She simply gathered Alara into a huge, warm hug, the kind that sinks right down to your toes. Alara whispered into her mother's shawl, "Mama, I couldn't see anything." "It was so dark, but I sang your song, and your voice came back to me. It showed me the way out. Your voice was my light." Her mother smiled and held her tighter. "That's the secret, my brave girl. The deepest, darkest places can take away the sun, but they can never take away the songs you hold inside. Those songs are spun from love, and love is a light that doesn't need electricity. I finished the story there. I rubbed Lily's hand slowly with my thumb, tracing the small lines on her palm. We sat in silence for a long time. The room was still utterly, profoundly dark. I could hear a distant siren wail far off in the suburbs, a fleeting sound of the outside world, but our little bubble of quiet was preserved. I didn't rush her to speak or react. I simply maintained the contact, the steady warmth of my skin against hers, proving that my presence, the sound of my voice, and the feel of my hand were all still perfectly functional, even without power. I felt her breathing deepen again, slower and more rhythmic than before. The tension had fully drained out of her little body. "See, sweet girl?" I whispered, reinforcing the lesson without destroying the fragile piece. The story wasn't in the book. It was in the air, shared between us. The story was the light. She didn't respond immediately with words. Instead, she let go of my arm, which had been clutching tightly since the power outage, and she moved closer, resting her head gently on my shoulder, burrowing into the curve of my neck. I felt her lips brush my skin as she yawned, a deep, satisfied sound. She was no longer afraid of the dark. She was simply tired and safe. She trusted the darkness now because she knew what it contained, the sound of love, the unwavering connection between us. She was held and anchored, not by the small plastic device that required electricity, but by the unbreakable human circuit of family. I sat there in the silence, keeping my arms wrapped gently around her, listening to the soft, even sound of her breathing as she slipped into a deep, peaceful sleep. I stayed for perhaps another hour, rooted to the spot, enjoying the rare opportunity to simply be in the dark with her, completely present. It was a baptism of sorts for our relationship, a test of trust that we had passed simply by staying still and connected. The darkness had forced us to rely entirely on the abstract, the emotional, the deep-seated knowledge that we mattered profoundly to one another. Sometime just before dawn, I heard the faint thunk of the refrigerator downstairs kicking back on, followed a moment later by the comforting, low hum of the air conditioner returning to its duty. A thin line of light immediately appeared beneath the door, indicating that the hallway lights were back on. The power had returned. I gently shifted Lily so she was lying back down on her pillow, pulling the soft duvet over her shoulders. The nightlight, that tiny, faithful blue square, was once again glowing steadily from the wall, but I knew, and she would soon know, that its importance had diminished forever. It was now just decoration. The real beacon was portable and internal. I crept out of the room, closing the door softly behind me, carrying the profound feeling of that shared darkness with me. When I finally went back into her room a few hours later, the morning sun was already streaming in, painting bright, clean squares of light across the carpet. Lily was awake, sitting up against her pillows, cheerfully talking to her stuffed dinosaur. When she saw me, she immediately broke into a wide, luminous smile. She looked completely rested. The shadow of fear from the night before entirely vanished. "Good morning, sweet girl," I said, walking over and sitting down again on the edge of the bed. She reached out and took my hand, not with the frantic, fearful grip of the previous night, but with a gentle, assured connection. She looked up at the sunny window, then back at me, her eyes clear and thoughtful. "Mama," she said, her voice bright and certain. "Last night, but dark tried to take everything away, but it couldn't take you." She paused, looking thoughtfully at the small blue light that was now superfluous in the morning sun. "The nightlight is just plastic, right?" "Just plastic and electricity," I confirmed. She squeezed my hand once more, confirming the lesson of the echoing cave. "Mom," she said, letting out a breath that sounded like final, pure understanding, "you're my nightlight." And in that simple, innocent declaration, She crystallized the entire lesson of human connection, of family, and of unconditional love.
It was a phrase so pure, so profoundly moving, that it instantly felt like the single most important thing I had ever heard in my life. It wasn't about the absence of fear, but the presence of trust.
It was the realization that our job as parents isn't to eliminate the darkness from the world, because that's impossible, but to ensure that our children carry an internal, renewable source of light that doesn't depend on external factors. We live in a world that is always flickering, always dealing with sudden outages, both physical and emotional. We are constantly seeking that quick, easy fix, the plastic light, the screen glow, the superficial reassurance. But this moment, forged in absolute darkness, taught me that the truest comfort comes from the steady, warm glow of relationship. It is the voice, the touch, the story, and the promise that even when the exterior world is completely obscured, the love that binds us remains perfectly, wonderfully visible. It is the simple, honest truth that love doesn't need sight to survive. It only needs echo and belief. So the next time the lights go out for you, whether it's a sudden storm, an unexpected crisis, or just the creeping anxiety of a quiet night, stop searching for the switch. Stop looking for the external fix. Instead, look inward. Find the story, find the song, find the voice that reminds you of home. Tell that story out loud. Be that steady sound for someone else. Because that is where the real light lives. That is the promise we make to each other, a promise more powerful than any electric current. Hold that love close. Share that light. Tell someone you love them today, simply because their presence is your anchor. And if this story resonated with you, share it with someone who needs a little reminder that their love is the light for their family. Let's keep these essential human connections glowing brightly.